But at some point, my cats are going to come along and jump on my lap and run over the computer, and that's just that's how it is in the Drew household. You know what I'm saying?
I would love to see that happen, like right in the middle. I I had another conversation with Shane Trotter on the podcast, and about a month ago, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in the school, and the PA came on like 3 times, asking for like this one person to come to the principal's office or something, and it was like the same guy over and over again. And he was like, Jesus, you'd think they'd have his text or something, you know, like they sent him a text or like he's not coming, man.
Yeah.
So I welcome distractions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, man. Well, I guess I'm going to take a note from your book and say a couple nice things about you before we start, because I think that's a pretty nice practice. I would say that, you know, we met, Jesus, I don't know, I guess last year. How long have we known each other? A year? Year and a half?
Feels like eternity.
It feels like eternity. It does. One of the things I noticed about you right away was that you're a very open person. You're truly seeking wisdom, and you're open to any and all mediums through which to learn that. And so I highly respect that. And I think with that openness comes vision. And that's, I suppose, why we are working together so much now is because we decided to. And you had a vision for what was needed in the world. And I was, you know, chugging along doing my podcast and doing my best there. But between the two of us, I think, well, obviously we both decided to work together more. And I think part of that is because of that openness, and I respect your vision for what you're trying to do there. And I guess that really leads into our topic today, which is trying to define the mess that we're in. And I'm not going to try and blabber too much, but I do want to say that I had a conversation with Rocco about a month ago, and we were talking about a lot of different things, really the hero's journey. But one of the things that came up was the mess. He mentioned this in an explanation for something, the mess that we're in. And I questioned him on it. I said, well, what do you mean by the mess? And then we spent a little bit of time trying to figure that out. But really, I think that mess, whatever it is, that's what we're trying to figure out at the Walled Garden. And so I thought that it would both be an interesting conversation for the podcast, but also beneficial for us as an organization to try and define what that mess is. So I'm going to open it up to you, man. Welcome. You said that you're well prepared for this based on your experiences today, which is very good to know. So welcome. And I don't know, where do you want to get started with this? What do you think?
Thanks, man. I'm always glad to be here, and I'm always glad to talk with you. Because we are brothers, and I know that because we want the same things, and yeah, it's interesting. You talk about the mess. This is going to be fun, because what I really want to do is I want to tell everybody exactly what the problems are that we're facing today, and I want to tell them exactly how to fix it, because I do have those answers, every single one of them. And of course, I'm joking. No, look, when you talk about mess. Something that comes to my mind is, you know, so you'll know I've recently joined the management team at a really awesome music school here in Southern California, and as soon as I entered this place, I was like, yeah, I want to be here, you know. And the exciting thing is I'm working with the owner of the school is the kind of person who so clearly aligns with the Walled Garden. You know, he's a preacher. He's got a Master of Divinity, PhD. You know, he's a highly educated person, and really has such a beautiful soul, a beautiful way of approaching his relationships with the people he works with. I'm honored that I got to meet him, and we just immediately fell in love with each other. And hey, how can we work together? Okay, you know, I'm in. But one of the things that I mentioned to him is, you know, now that I'm really in the weeds, looking in this organization and everything, you know, the drains are clogged. You know, when I said the drains are clogged, I mean, you know, you can see that things move very slowly for us at this point, because, I mean, things get backed up. You know, people don't have the energy to fix everything that needs to be fixed. And over time, those drains get clogged, and all of a sudden, everything becomes quite slow. The same thing is happening here in California, I would say. I mean, like, everywhere you go, there's just chaos. Just the highways are insane. You just think it is very messy, and that's what's happening in the world at the moment. And when the drains are clogged, meaning that chaos is flowing into the system, do people even have the energy in these times to even stop and think, oh, what are some of the problems that I could fix in my local community? No, I mean, like, when you've got a bloated government, and massive taxes on a lot of people, when things are getting so expensive these days, when you've got all this chaos happening around the world with war and, famine and food insecurity, around the world, people are just getting by. People are getting by. And I think it's valuable to have this conversation. And I don't know, yeah, where would you like to start today? We've defined that there's obviously chaos afoot, but where would you like to
there's
start?
Chaos afoot. I love that imagery. The drains are clogged. That line. We tend to think in our hubris, or I guess in our day-to-day life, that things naturally stay the same. So from day to day, the incremental change, positive or negative, is very small. It has to be, and that's a good thing. That means things can't change too fast. But the default state for anything is regression. It's breaking down. Like if you work let's say your squat up to 200 pounds, that's not going to stay like that if you stop going to the gym. It's going to go down. You don't get 200 pounds and hold on to it. You have to maintain that. At the very least, there's a minimum requirement. There's a minimum required work that you have to do in order to maintain that. And that's the same. That's built into the fabric of reality. This fact that things naturally decay over time, and it takes regular maintenance to fix that. And so one of the issues that you're talking about there, where people are lacking getting involved in their community, I think that's one of those principles that really we've lost in some way, that we're so focused on, let's say, international recognition or even connection. If you look at like things like social media, where people want to have 10,000 friends on Facebook, yet they don't have a friend that they could go over and have a cup of tea, or go and just walk on in, not even knock on the door, like a good friend like that. We tend to, as Sharon would say, we're a mile wide, but we're an inch deep. And I think that's really, I think what you're talking about there is we're lacking depth. I suppose if you could put it in one simple word, we're lacking depth, or one simple phrase rather.
Or at least closeness. There's that great saying, tend to the part of the garden that you can touch, right? Like, I had this conversation with a client the other day, somebody who you'll know, but I won't mention the name, obviously. But we were talking about how she was kind of saying, I can't remember the specifics of the conversation, but she was saying something like, every day I have to drive this amount for my work, and she has to drive a lot for her work, and even just that, being a person who has to drive like 2 or 3 hours a day, that can clog up those drains, and just drain your energy. But one of the things she said, just as a passing comment, was, yeah, I have to drive this much per day, and I really don't like the fact that it's contributing to global warming. I said, whoa, hang on, stop. You're 28 years old. Okay, you're trying to get your life in order. You're trying to pull everything in line so that you can, do well and support yourself and your family and the people around you. Please forget about climate change. It's too big of a problem. It's too big of a problem. And when you've got all of these localized things that you need to take care of, okay, please, the last thing that you need to worry about is the fact that you're driving your car and that it's contributing a tiny little bit to climate change. People, I think we really need to learn to bring things much, much closer to us. And I know that that's cheap words coming from somebody who's, like, I'm trying to start this philosophical society, global organization, with big ambitions to change the world. But I think we all do it with a spirit of humility, saying, we're not going to like save the world, but at least we can do our little part as philosophers. And maybe we can gather a few people together from around the world who really believe in our mission. And I think that what's beautiful about what we're doing in the World Garden is we recognize that so many of the problems that we face today are philosophical in nature. They come right back to, what are your values? How do you deal with a problem? What do you believe is true and right and beautiful? All of these beautiful philosophical questions. How are you going to deal with the chaos that pops up? What is chaos? What does it look like? And how do you deal with it? These are all philosophical questions. And if we can pull it right back to that extremely localized position, which is your internal mindset, the way that you even see the world. Because I believe that one of the major issues that we're facing today is we've got like a Tower of Babel situation where we have more power than we've ever had in human history. We have so much technology. We have so much innovation. We have such quick speed of communication. Everything is available to us in terms of the technology, the ability to go out there and change the world. But nonetheless, it's like, how do we bring that back to a localized level, and do we even understand each other anymore? Part of that story of the Tower of Babel is, all of a sudden the people are scattered and they don't understand each other anymore. Look at what's happening in the world. On the global level, which is where so many of us live because we're all online, we feel as though there's such division, there's so much hatred, there's so much vitriol towards the other side, whatever the hell that is. But then, I've started managing this music school, and everybody that comes in there is pretty kind, well-spoken, there's no arguments. We're not spitting venom at each other every day. People from very diverse backgrounds, but on a localized level, like everyone's just living their lives trying to get on with it. So it's hard to know whether the major problems that we face today are these kind of, because we're living too much in the globalized network of the internet, and that's why I say, you come back to yourself. What's your personal philosophy? What do you believe in? How do you set up reality in your mind? And then what can you do for your family? And then what can you do for your community? And I think that I'm really grateful to be here in California, and I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to now actually take a step back and say, oh, I can start with this little community over in Tustin where we've got this music school. We can make a massive difference in this community. And I'm going to start there and then build that outwards and outwards and outwards. And who knows where that goes. But anyway, I'll throw it over to you because I've just been rambling for many points here.
No, well, I mean, that's beautiful. I think I would agree that it is a proximity issue. That's something that engineers have figured out for a very long time. When you have a problem, you address the smallest problem first. If it's an emergency, if shit's hitting the fan, you have to react to that initially. But if you have, in general, a problem, a complex problem, you don't start by thinking, okay, well, what's the biggest issues that humanity's facing? Okay, well, let's say it's global warming. Well, let's fix that. It's too complicated. And it's not only too complicated in that, for us to actually deal with that properly, it's complicated. That's the best way of saying it. But it's also the case that a lot of times when you're working on something that has a lot of issues, say someone's personal life, they have issues in their head, they have issues with their family and the community and with the world. Sometimes when you work out the let's say the closest problem that you have, if you fix that problem, sometimes what that does is it changes the gears in your life such that it actually fixes some of the other problems in your life. So it's a very interesting thing because you might say, well, okay, I'm having a lot of let's say anxiety, and then if you can work through that, something that's not too severe, but something that you can let's say work through with philosophy. So you have an anxiety problem. Maybe you also have trouble making friends. Well, if you fix the anxiety problem, which is the closest problem that you can fix because it's within your grasp to do it, all of a sudden that other problem that you had that's a little bit further out on the next level slightly further out of grasp, but not too far out of grasp, all of a sudden that problem gets so much easier to face. Sometimes if you fix the closest problem, it fixes your bigger problems, but at the very least, most of the time, it makes them easier to manage. And that's just a huge thing. I mean, death by 1,000 cuts, you know what I mean? Like if you focus on one little cut at a time, eventually what you'll do is you'll have a clean, nice, healed body. So yeah, I mean, that's a great point about localized things. So I guess what would you think about in terms of, I don't know, what is that closest thing for most people?
What is the closest thing? Well, I think that the Stoics get it exactly right, which is to say the closest thing that you actually have any control over or power over, or maybe influence over might be the better way to put it over. I think control is the wrong way to look at it. The most influence you have really is over the your own personal philosophy, how you see the world, and that will have outpourings of how you act in the world. One of the things that we were discussing this morning, we had this really excellent interview and meetup with Professor William O. Stevens, and he was talking about, we discussed Stoic cosmology and theology. I really believe that the big issue of our time is theological in nature. One of the things that we discussed was I talked about how Christianity and Islam, among other religions, but predominantly them, have become quite well known for their drastic tactics when it comes to uh, uh, expanding around the world. You think big conquests. These going out there and conquering foreign nations and bringing them under Christian rule or under Islamic rule. On the one hand, I really obviously we can all agree that it's not ideal to go out there and use warfare as a tactic to convert people to your religion. On the other hand, I do understand why they would think that it would be beneficial for the entire world if we could all agree on something. Mm-hmm. By force is another question, but if we could all agree on something, because kind of what's promised in these religions is a philosophy or a theology that actually will help you to understand how the world works and how you relate to the world, and will help you to see that we don't actually live in a completely fragmented universe, which we are rushing as quickly as we can to rediscover. But we do live in, there is a oneness, there is a totality of which we are a part, which means that things make sense on every single level if you can see from this view. And I think that one of the major issues of our time is that we are so obsessed with fragmentation. This morning we were discussing this because one of the attendees in the meetup, Angie, she mentioned that she studied sociology. And, what do they teach you in sociology? Well, we've got these groups of people, you're black or you're white or you're Asian or you're, Mexican or whatever. Okay, intersectionality. Okay, or maybe you're a man or you're a woman or you're, any number of the wide variety of new discoveries, whatever it is, but this intersectionality. And the point that we were discussing this morning is perhaps there wouldn't be so much pushback against these ideas if at the end of teaching these ideas, they then taught you how all of these fragments actually go to build up to the whole again, so that we can see how we are interconnected, how we do have common ground. We do have commonality among us as human beings. And this is what the Stoics taught, that among us human beings, we're not just a whole bunch of fragmented pieces. We are that. Plus, we are also part of a global community of human beings. We have commonality among us. There are things that bring us together. Plus, as the race of human beings, we are also a necessary part of the grander scheme of the cosmos. There is a whole, there is a totality, and there is the fragmented. But at the moment, we are obsessed with fragmentation, and we can't keep on going in that direction too long. That's literally the story of the Tower of Babel. Mass fragmentation. We get so close to God, and then we pull apart, and go in every other direction until we just can't understand each other. And look at what's happening today: mass polarization on the political front, on the religious front. But I think it is incumbent upon all of us to find a way for us to come together and agree on something, because otherwise we don't have a culture, we don't have a nation, we don't even have a community. We just have individual realities wandering around, not understanding where anybody is coming from, because you're evil and I'm good, and so, that's kind of why I said to you this morning's meetup was so powerful, because we were discussing that very principle, that in Stoicism, we can see, you can see, once you understand the language, once you understand this system of logic, you can see, oh my gosh, of course I'm interconnected with everything else and everyone else. Of course there's commonality. Of course there is a oneness and also the fragmentation. And you don't have to believe in a Christianized God or a Muslim God, or, you just have to see that there is a whole, there is a one, and there is a part, many parts. So I don't know, I'll throw it over to you because I keep on rambling, but to me, that's what I've been thinking a lot about lately, is just the obsession with fragmentation that we seem to be really stuck in right now. And I'm quite worried about it.
We're focused on, as you would say, fragmentation. And I think the way through that is, as you mentioned, by realizing that we have something in common. So you said theological. It's a theological issue. I'm going to word it a little bit different. I would say, even though we're probably talking about the same thing, I would say that we all have to come to an understanding that despite our disagreement at this present moment, we are serving something higher than ourselves. And that thing that's higher than ourselves used to be something like God, right? And if you think about God psychologically, maybe we can agree with that. But I'm even going to bring this right down to earth. We are seeking truth. We're seeking wisdom. We're seeking justice. And, you might say, like the divine, which is really taking the religious connotation out of it, all of that included. We have to understand that at the end of the day, and agree that there's certain values that we share. And, you and I, for example, people might be surprised to know this because they hear our podcast episodes, but in the organization, you and I disagree quite a bit, right? We always have these little disagreements about how to do things properly. And I think neither of us see that as a bad thing. And the reason we don't see it as a bad thing is because you and I both accept that we are serving something greater. And that is the success of the walled garden, which ties right back to this mess that we're trying to fix. So fixing this mess that we're in is more important to you and I than being right in this present moment. And that's, I think, what we have to understand. Now, you might ask, well, what are those higher order values? What are those higher order values? And I think, we have a pretty damn good model. It's something like Stoicism, right? It's something like justice, wisdom, courage, temperance. It's something like seeking truth. It's something like, as the forefathers would say, freedom of speech, which allows us to seek truth in the first place. But I guess I'll throw it back to you. What do you think those higher order? Well, do you agree that that's, I guess, a good representation of what you were saying? And what would you say that those higher order values would be?
Yeah, I think it's important to note, that Brandon and myself, you and I, we are, really trying to push this organization forward. But even within the organization, it's not just two young guys, who are there. We've got some of the most profound philosophers in the world. Really, I'm so excited to have the kinds of people who we have on board. People who are university professors, people who have been best-selling authors, in the field of philosophy. People who are profound in their knowledge of the ancient languages and their knowledge of these great ancient philosophies. Somebody like Rocco, he's just, his knowledge of mysticism and the cool thing about the Walled Garden is we've got Muslims, we've got Christians, Buddhists, we've got, atheists, we've got Stoics, but we all come together and say, okay, maybe we don't know the full picture of what's wrong in the world, but here's an idea. Okay, maybe it's this or maybe it's that. But ultimately, I think it comes down to something that Rocco said. He said, if the way is not seeking better ways, it's not the way. So if it's not about constantly seeking better ways of living, of giving, of building community, of, it's not the way, meaning universal law. I think that's probably something that we all come together on. There's this verse in Isaiah where Isaiah says, God, you send your judgments down, and the people of the people of the world learn righteousness. Now we can look at that at a very secular level. What that means is that there is a totality. There is this natural law. We're constantly walking through the world, and what are we doing all the time? We're hitting things with a hammer, and sometimes things hit back. And we're like, okay, I won't do that again. Okay, and then we hit things with a hammer, and then something hits back. Okay, I won't do that again. Think about it as God's judgment. Think about it as natural law. Think about it as whatever it is. Whatever it is, we live in a world where there is a reality to be discerned. As in, if we do some things, we get harmed. If we do some things, we grow and we strengthen and we become healthier, more peaceful individuals, whole individuals. And so that's what we're searching for in the World Garden. Whether you're searching for that through the study of Stoicism or of Hermetics, or reading poetry, or listening to music, or reading philosophy, or Seneca or Nietzsche, whatever it is, all of us are trying to learn what are the natural laws that will, if I'm in alignment with them, then I'm going to be able to find greater inner peace and calm along my path. That's going to lead me to be able to give more peace to the people around me. Something that Charles, the person who owns the music store, he says, we can be a channel for blessings in other people's lives, But can you really do that? Or can't you do that so much more effectively if you find peace within yourself first? So I think we're all kind of we share the feeling that things are not good right now, as in. What I mean that is, in the fragmented world, we are finding so many ways to divide ourselves, and we are finding so many ways to not be in agreement with each other on the commonalities that bring us human beings together. But there has to be better ways. There has to be better ways, and that's what we're searching for. Really, I believe.
Yeah, and I would throw this analogy at you, because I think it might be useful to describe what we're talking about here. Okay, well, first of all, my biggest worry, though, is that we are fundamentally disagreeing on things. That's my biggest concern. When I've had arguments with people online, which I'm not proud of admitting, but we all do it. But where they would say that there's no objective truth. Now that's a very dangerous statement. It's not only dangerous, it's incredibly foolish to say that there's no objective reality, because even in sending a message online, you're acting in a way that observes that there is an objective reality, because all that is based on science. So that's a foundation that, this idea that everything is subjective, that you brought up earlier about people subjectively determining their identity versus part of your identity is actually, most of it is actually objective. And then another thing that we're disagreeing on fundamentally is freedom of speech, which again goes to seeking truth. That's where my worry is that we are actually losing these foundations. And I one of the reasons why I think this is happening, you can imagine if you were to build a house, you have the ground, right? You build a foundation of cement, you build a house on top, you decorate the house. That's kind of what we've done as a culture. Let's say in the West, we have this Western philosophy that we've built up over the ages. See, I think that the foundation itself is something resembling Stoicism. It's pretty damn close to Stoicism. And it's even the foundation, I think, of Christianity. So maybe Christianity is like the house. Now, what happens, again, because things naturally decay over time, doors start falling apart, the hinges get loose, the door handle gets loose, the paint starts peeling. What do? Well, you try and repair it if it's still useful. If it no longer matches the modern environment, you rip the damn thing down. So if you have to rip the house down, you rip that apart. Now what do you have left? Well, you have the foundation. Maybe the foundation is cracked. Maybe Stoicism's no good for us anymore, and let's just destroy that as well. Let's go under the ground and dig in there and see if there's anything there that's still useful. We have this natural tendency to become superfluous in our culture, and then we get a little bit too overextended, and then we have to dig back deep and figure out, no, what's actually worth saving here? If we burn everything away, what's left? What's strong? And I think that that's globally what we're doing right now as a culture. And that's where you see people moving from Christianity into something like Stoicism. Stoicism is the foundation of Christianity, at least in my opinion, if you look at it historically.
Yeah, certainly
speaking.
a foundation, I would say.
It's a foundation, yeah. So we are doing that from a philosophical standpoint as well, but we're doing it culturally as well. I don't know. What do you think of that analogy?
No, I love it. I think it's exactly right. I remember Jordan Peterson once saying that there's something to this idea of getting the gist of something. The gist is if you burn as much dead wood as possible, what's the basic plot here? What's the basics? And what we, perhaps what we really need right now in our culture, think about the fact that for so many centuries, perhaps if you were in a Christianized nation, that's all you saw, because that was the religion of the time. If you're in a place where Buddhism was predominant, okay, that's what you saw. That was your reality. You understood each other because, well, we all see each other every Sunday if in a Christianized, world. And so, but now we live in a time where we've got to figure out the gist of all of these religions that we can now see and explore, all of these different philosophies. We've got to figure out the gist. Like, what are the commonalities? What brings them all together? What brings us all together? What can we all agree on is the basic plot here. And I think that that's an incredibly difficult challenge. But perhaps if enough people can come together and agree that, hey, it would be better if we didn't all, end the next decade by blowing ourselves up with nuclear weapons,
Right.
And but there's just so much to figure out. We do live in a time of great complexity. I really do believe that we live in a time where chaos is emerging at a very quick speed. Now, if you look at it in the totality level, right, I find a lot of hope and a lot of peace in the recognition that there is this, on every level, things are working for this whole, and so sometimes we don't quite see, well, we can't see because of we're human beings. We can't see many steps ahead. And so perhaps things are working out for an ultimate cause. But, you can get real existential dread when you look around and you think, man, there are so many ways that we are just rushing towards our demise. And I think that the hope is in the fact that we as individuals can put our internal world together and then our families together and then our communities together. We can do that. And I think people are looking for that, and they're looking for leadership. Something that Charles recently said to me, he said, when times are chaotic, it's a great opportunity for leaders, because now you can come in there and you can say, hey guys, let's get together. We can solve this. We can do this. And that's why I think that in this age, we live in a time of heroes. We live in a time of giants, because things are so complex and so chaotic for so many people that everybody is looking. Please just give me a leader. Give me somebody who can actually help me to find a little bit more peace as I navigate this chaos in my life. Now, that can manifest itself in strange ways, like you see Donald Trump. Classic example. Times are tough for a lot of people, and what do they respond by doing? Voting in this guy who comes along and says, you know what, you're being downtrodden. America's not doing well. We could be doing way better. Let's make it great again. And people are saying, okay, yeah, let's do that. Because what other option do I have? But we can do better. We can do better as individuals in our communities, and then expanding out from there. So I think this is a time where we need to think very carefully about the leaders who we look up to, and we need to think very carefully about whether or not we can be one of those leaders in our households, in our communities, and help people in this time of great need. I don't know if I answered your question, but there was one quick thing that I wanted to mention there. Uh, so this idea that there's no objective truth. One of the more frightening ideas that I don't think I can like it makes sense to me that this is the case, but it is kind of a frightening reality to live in, is that um, our words and our thoughts really do determine how we see the world and how the world responds to us. And that's hopeful, because we can say, okay, well, if I can really dig deep, if I can really figure out a philosophy that actually makes sense, that puts me in alignment with natural law, that puts me in alignment with these principles of the universe that will help me to get through this life with a bit of equanimity, then there's hope for me. I can get through this, and maybe my life will be extremely meaningful if I can get that right. But on the flip side of that is, if you get that wrong, your reality is going to be not good at all. Not good at all. And I think that spectrum reaches all the way up to a heavenly existence. And I think that spectrum leads all the way down to the worst kind of life that you could possibly hope for. I look out here, I live in California now. Everywhere you look, there's homeless people. And, that's a massive issue that we've got to solve as humanity. But what that does teach us is that it's possible to be in a reality that is so traumatic, so horrifying, um, and so what I hope is that we can find something collectively as humanity that brings us together, so that we can so, so that we can move back to a place where our realities are better than they would have been if we just kept on going down these dark directions. Um, I'm just I'm afraid that we're moving in a direction where eventually it's just going to be everybody's just this individual who lives in their own individual reality that is always in flux, and we don't understand each other, and we can't come together in commonality. I don't think that will happen, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just rambling at this point.
No, but you said it there, is that yes, our thoughts and how we perceive the world and the philosophy that we choose to adopt does, in a sense, create our reality, but only if it's aligned, as you said, with natural law, which is objective reality. That this is the live according to nature, the three parts of that. One of that is Mother Nature, which is reality herself. You can't. No philosophy of life is going to allow you to go against natural law. Meaning, if you believe that you can walk on water, that's not frozen. Let's make sure we're covering all caveats here. It doesn't really matter whether or not you believe that. You're still going to get soaked. That's why it's so important, as you made clear there, that the philosophy that you choose to adopt has to be aligned with as you would say, natural law, or as I would say, objective reality. It just has to, because you can only bend reality so much before it snaps back. And I think we're seeing some of that now with some of the issues that we're facing with identity, where people think that identity is completely subjective. And, it's horrendous to see children mutilating their bodies because of this ideology. And, it's the truth of that is that eventually reality is going to snap back, and they're going to realize, oh shit, no, this isn't, you can only bend reality so long before it snaps back. And I think you're in agreement with that.
Well, I mean, look, ask somebody for an honest answer. Do you feel peace within yourself? Do you feel as though you're contributing meaningfully to the world? Do you feel as though you experience deep meaning in your life? Obviously we all go through tough times, but you will find people who, even in spite of difficult circumstances in life, you ask them and they still have peace. And that's a
Right.
person
Yes.
who's come across a philosophy that makes sense, right? We also live in a world where some people genuinely believe that they are a dog. They genuinely believe that they are a cat. There are these this is happening. What a strange reality we're living in. Really, and I'm not trying to be disparaging or mean to these people. I genuinely feel sorry genuinely feel sorry for the person who actually believes that they're a dog. One of the things that the Stoics said, part of the philosophy, is that language is incredibly important. You need to understand certain words, how they fit into certain sentences, how they fit into certain paragraphs, so that you can put the world together. So to the Stoics, if you didn't believe in God, it's just a matter of bad grammar. You just don't understand how this whole system of logic fits together, and it actually makes sense, right? And what they would say is that a pretty sure sign that your culture is on its way to collapse is if the language is completely bastardized. If
Yes.
the language is, and look at how we speak today, how we text, like, that's why I love what Jordan Peterson says about, like, listen, teach people to read, teach them to write, teach them to speak. You're unstoppable if you can do that. But when we live in a world where people's vocabulary, they're using it to literally form their reality, where I am a dog, or I am a cat, or I am this animal, or I am whatever the hell it is, that's a massive fragmentation. That's a massive degradation of language, of philosophy. But we live in a reality where that's actually possible, where you can formulate your words in such a way where you genuinely believe that you're an animal. And I'm afraid of where, not afraid, but I'm uh, I'm I'm watching what's happening and thinking, where does this lead ultimately? Um, and I really hope for people. I really hope that maybe what we can do in the walled garden is present people with options. Hey, you want to explore spirituality, or you want to explore philosophy? Here's a beautiful environment where you can do that, free from any sort of judgment or shame or whatever it is. Just explore different ways of perceiving the world, and maybe Buddhism will help you. Maybe Christianity will help you. Maybe Stoicism will help you. Maybe it's no ism. Maybe you just come along and you're exploring these philosophies and you find some idea that completely turns your life around. We all know that a single idea can lead to massive changes in life. But I think what we want to do is encourage people as well. Really go on this journey. See how good your life could become if you were really able to put your words together, if you were able to write effectively, if you were able to speak effectively, if you were able to explore like a true seeker these profound ideas that have been passed on to us from throughout the ages. People have figured out answers to the most profound questions that we have. And we've got to keep on figuring them out, because we forget. And I think in our modern times, we've forgotten. And now we're remembering, oh yeah, look at our culture. Everybody's depressed. Everybody's struggling. Politicians are lying constantly. Everybody else is lying constantly. Do we trust each other anymore? We're obsessed with the other, with the pointing fingers. It's your fault. It's your fault. Things are not that great in the world of philosophy right now. We're living in a very prosperous time, of course, but with this great challenge, this great chaos that we see pouring into our worlds, with there's this massive divide in our language, in our philosophies. There's a great opportunity for people to actually come together and bring people together and say, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? Maybe you don't have to maybe you don't have to believe that you're in a reality where there's the good guys and the bad guys. Maybe if we can just agree that we want to be better, we want to live better, and we want to contribute better to this world, maybe that's enough to get us on the right path. And so I hope that for everybody, and I hope that for everybody who is now really suffering in this time where, like we say, it's really easy to fall into a kind of indoctrination or a kind of ideology that just does nothing good for your mental health and for your well-being in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I share that sentiment that, these people that are really struggling with identity. I don't feel anything negative towards them, except I really feel sorry for them. I really do, because we all feel that way when we're young to some degree. Like when you're a teenager, God, of course you're going to feel lost. Or of course you're going to struggle with identity. I mean, that's really the whole point of those teenage years. What I would say, because you mentioned something there about we're drifting away from our fundamental values, which allow us to flourish. And, it's something that's hard to fight, because to get back to the house example, if you build a house, someone comes along and builds a foundation, and then you build a house on top of it. Like, okay, I'm in my room right now. I see walls. I see my decorations. Even my walls could be shit, and I wouldn't even know unless I remove my decorations. I don't even think about the foundations under my house and when that's got to be replaced. So that's kind of what culture is like. You slowly drift away from your values, and part of the reason is because you don't have to think about that anymore. So take the founding fathers. They basically they had to fight for their freedom of speech, essentially, which was a British value initially, but their system drifted. But they set freedom of speech as an essential human right, and they did that because they were dealing with a tyrannical government. Now, what is it? 150 years later, now we're at a place where, okay, well, actually, we're challenging that foundational value. Now we're saying, no, you should have to use the language that I require. And so we're no longer faced, because people don't see a tyrannical government right now. People don't have to deal with that same thing. The scary part of that is I think these things kind of go in cycles. But we do seem to have this fear, or I don't want to say hatred because it's a strong word, but this we detest structure. We detest culture a lot of times, because there's also an oppressive element. And this is where I'm going with this in terms of what you mentioned, coming into a philosophy of life. When you adopt a philosophy of life, you adopt discipline, you adopt values, and that's it. In a sense, you could say that it takes away some of your freedom. In a sense, you're quote, quote, free, let's say spiritually, but your actions are not free. I mean, here's a great example. If you want to go to work and be successful at your work, you got to get up every morning. You got to go to work at the same time. You could very well look at that and say that's an oppressive system because it's taking away my freedoms. And you know what? It's kind of right. Yet we fear this. We fear adhering to a particular structure because we feel the oppressive nature of it. And we're focused so much on the oppressive nature that we're not recognizing the value of something like getting up every morning and going to work. All we're feeling is the oppressive forces. I don't know. What do you think about that blab?
No, I think it's an interesting idea that a lot of us are responding to. Well, I think that there's validity in that kind of feeling. I'm an artist. I'm a musician, a very creative individual. Everything that I do really goes through the lens of creativity, because I want things to be beautiful. I want things to be interesting, and so to me as an artist, especially, putting walls up around things, I respond quite negatively to. Not negatively, but I try to do that as little as possible. Having said that, sometimes you need the walls, in order to be challenged, to rise to a new level, or to see a different vision, to see a different part of yourself.
To build.
I think it's exactly. And I want to be clear with people also, just on one thing. I don't want to seem too negative. I really do have hope, because I can see that in these times there are heroes rising. There are brilliant people out there doing incredibly good work, trying to spread goodness and virtue and beauty and wisdom around the world, so that we can perhaps come together on a few common grounds. But yeah, when you say this idea that these walls that we put up around things, culture is kind of mythologically represented. As I understand it, culture is it's part chaos, part order, but ultimately it's a more ordering force.
It's a
we kind of rose out of nature, and it's interesting to note that in the Bible, there's this constant flow of like oh, we're looking for more and more and more ways to hide ourselves from the chaos of the world, from our vulnerability, So what's the first thing that Adam and Eve do when they find out that they're vulnerable? Where they put leaves over their over their crotch, right? Because it's like, don't want anybody to see. That is, as Peterson points out, it's the first emergence of culture. Very interesting idea. And then we keep on finding more and more ways to look at us today. We're so powerful with our defenses, that we could literally just wipe out so many people with these, these layers that we've added to our defenses of being vulnerable. And I think it's really easy for us to kind of get into this cycle of thinking, well, don't put limits on me, don't put this on me, don't put walls around me. Okay, that makes sense, but perhaps look at these walls as an opportunity. Like I said, right now things are quite chaotic. One of the things that I think is happening in America is it's such a bloated government. There's so many regulations. I was talking to somebody the other day who was talking about California specifically, and what they were saying is, I have to verify this, but you might buy a property for $100,000. Then you might have to spend up to $500,000 doing all the environmental tests and all of the, all of these checks that you need to do on this land that you've just bought. You have to do a very expensive test for the bugs in the area, things like that. Look, we all want to take care of the environment, but man, loosen up those regulations. There has to be a balance. And like you say, sometimes culture can be the tyrannizing force. I would say that California's got a lot of that tyrannizing force. Do what we say, and we're going to regulate the hell out of you. Well, what happens when that happens? Well, all the people with the money start to leave because why wouldn't they? They want to go somewhere where there's a free flow, where there is a kind of flow state to the general community, where we can do things with a little bit more ease. But on the other hand, it's important that there are those boundaries. One of the reasons it's important is because it gives us something to be strengthened by. We need to rise to a certain level in order to overcome this. But I don't know if I'm making any sense right now, but that's what I
I love it. Yeah, I love it. I would just add to that the necessity of structure is that you need it to build anything. You need a structure to build anything. I mean, you can think about it like a house of cards, right? I mean, what you're doing when you're building a house of cards is you're building structure. And then once you get the first layer, that allows you to go a next level up and become taller. And then you build more structure on top of that. Obviously, things can be overstructured, as you mentioned, and that's where you get into a tyrannical government. And you see this a lot. I see this a lot today in the safety industry, which I brought up with Rocco. But, when you work in construction, it's very common now to prioritize safety over everything else. And that might sound very cruel to some people. But what happens if you overemphasize safety at the cost of efficiency, at the cost of, even ability to do the job, what you end up doing is you create a system that just fails. Because so here's a great example. If you can imagine, if you need to wear a harness when you're up, let's say 2 floors up and there's no railings, you have to wear a harness just in case you fall, it saves you. Okay, that's great. Now they change it. Okay, now you have to go, even if you're up 1 level, we'll put a harness on you. Okay, that's great. But now, okay, what if you're on 1 rung, the first rung of a ladder? Now you need a safety harness. And this is how crazy it's getting in some industries. Now all of a sudden what you're doing is you're creating an environment where there's so much structure that you can't even do the job properly.
The arteries
and that's
clogged,
really
right.
yes, exactly.
Slowly. Yeah.
Exactly. It's clogged. And that's where you're talking about these regulations in California. So the system is people should be able to buy a house. Great. Okay. So I have $100,000. I'm going to buy this house. But because of all this structure and regulation on top of it, now it's at the point where it doubles back on the purpose, because the cost to do the environmental checks and everything that's required under legislation is making it impossible for me to actually buy the damn house. And that's a great example of how overstructure destroys the system, because nobody can operate in such a system.
Yeah. I mean, another great example is California just had a whole bunch of lobbyists from some music. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the term. Group. Let's stick with that. Gee, I need to work on my language. But nonetheless, what they lobbied for was to make sure that musicians now can basically. This is from what I've heard, so there's probably more details here. And I heard this from musicians. If a musician is doing, more than one gig at a venue, for example, they have to be registered as an employee for that venue. Now, that is going to do so much damage to so many musicians, because so many musicians make their living from doing gig work, contract work, where they are doing a gig here and then they're doing a gig there, and they might be a regular at a venue, but as soon as it's like, okay, I have to employ you, then that's so much pressure on the employer, that's so much more hassle that they have to go through. And it's I know from musicians who I've already met here, they're trying to figure out ways that they can get around it. But that's just one more problem for a struggling musician, because really, now I have to work out an employment contract with this person and everything like that. It's just, and that's why I really think that the original intentions of these, American founders and the founding documents, of small government, a less bloated government. We know that things are going wrong when there's way too much, government control, when there's way too much regulation. And honestly, I think that that's one of the major reasons why so many people were attracted to somebody like Trump, is because he's out here. He's like, we're going to drain this swamp. We're going to get rid of so much of this stupid regulation. We're going to make sure that people who we're, out there protecting around the world, they're going to be paying us for the services. It's like somebody like that comes along and they start saying those sorts of things. And a lot of people are like, well, that makes sense, right? And I guess I want to make it clear to everybody, I have no axe to grind here. I definitely don't consider myself to be a Republican. I don't consider myself to be a liberal. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about naturally delves into those kinds of worlds. But man, I can understand why he is so popular, and especially after these first couple of years with Biden, I can see why he's probably got a good chance coming up. And that's it's going to be an interesting few years. And we'll see what happens, because I don't think these next elections are going to be calmer and any more fruitful than the last few have been. So yeah, I don't know if I just delved off into a completely random direction there, but
No. Well, I would say that one of the reasons why Trump got in was for that very reason that you said. I'll say it a little differently, but basically his whole argument was the government's corrupt. There's too much fluff. There's too much structure. It's becoming tyrannical. And as you said, we're going to drain the swamp, meaning we're going to burn away everything that's superficial and dig down to the foundations of the country. Now, whether or not he was the best person to do that, that's a whole other different thing. But that's what people saw in that. And this is what heroes do. If you look at any hero story, what you'll find is a culture where they've drifted away from the foundational values that have created that culture. And the hero, because the society is falling into chaos, because it's falling towards collapse, the hero digs deep, determines what those fundamental values are, which ones are worth adhering to, and then saves the culture using those fundamental values. And so to tie this right back to the start of this episode, and we should end here with a bit of practical advice. If you're a hero, you dig deep, you figure out what the foundational values are. That's what you have to do as an individual. What's important to me? A great place to start is history, is the ancient philosophies of Stoicism, Christianity, Islam. It doesn't really matter. Just get yourself into something, figure out what makes sense, determine what the foundations are, what has the most solidity to it, the most concreteness, and then start to live by those values. And as you mentioned, one of the most important ones is changing your perspective, adopting that philosophy, realizing that you actually do have the power within your mind to change how you really perceive the world, ultimately to live a better life, given, of course, that it's aligned with objective reality, which we've already covered. So what would you give in terms of practical advice?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, I just want to say I really hope that I hope that I've come off in the right way today, because I don't want to be too apologetic, but I did drink a coffee right before I came on this this
Oh my
conversation,
God, you
and
sinner, you.
I'm hyped up, man. But I hope to just clarify something. I try to approach these, very complex issues with a spirit of humility, and I don't think I've shown that very much today. I think I've probably come off in a way where maybe I seem like I know all the, as it seemed like I think I know all the answers, and that's certainly not the case. I'm aware of my own vulnerability and inability to solve all of these problems alone. That's why we're trying to build community in the walled garden, and that's why I love it. It's because we're getting people together from very diverse backgrounds and very diverse philosophies, and seeing what happens when we mesh all them together. Somebody else can teach me something I don't know, I can teach somebody else something they don't know. So I think, actually, in terms of practical advice, that's where I would go. One of the best pieces of advice or one of the best things I ever heard on my podcast was from Stephen Jenkinson. He said most people rush out there to solve the world's issues before they've even had a chance to figure out what the issue is in the first place. And I hope that what people find when they listen to anything that I do or anything in the walled garden is that perhaps we don't all agree on the exact locale of the problems, but we do agree that if we come together in common dialogue and humble dialogue, in a spirit of mutual problem solving and mutual seeking, then maybe something magical will happen there. And I think that always happens when I speak with you, Brandon, and that's the kind of spirit that you bring to these dialogues. So my practical advice is: A, start by assuming that you don't know the answers. Again, which I believe I've already sinned against that rule today. But on the other hand of that, dialogue is so important. Constant dialogue, with other human beings, face to face or over Zoom is fine. But man, face to face, if we can learn how to actually come together and speak with somebody who disagrees with us, that is so beautiful and so powerful. And I think people are hungry for that out there. People are ready for that, and I hope that we can facilitate a little bit of that in everything that we're doing, Brandon.
I hope so too, man. And that's really logos. I think it was a quote from Solzhenitsyn, and he said, this just blew my mind. He said, speech is what allowed us to become human. So if you think about what makes us human, one of those things is the ability to communicate within the complexity that we can. So being able to speak the way that we do transcended us from, let's say, primate to something more like a human being. And he said, if you remove freedom of speech, we resort to our animalistic ways. So I would just highly second that. Dialogue is, it's more than fundamental. It's logos. I mean, that's what it is. That is the way. It's through dialogue. And I mean, I don't think you were coming off to know it all, but I would say, like, man, every conversation that we have, whether it's philosophical, whether it's organizational, we're talking about the walled garden, it's always from you. There's a spirit of, listen, rip this apart. Like you come to me often with things, and you give me something. You said, here, this is my product, and you basically tell me, burn it and find out what's left. And I think, like, that's what we have to do. Now, that's painful. It's painful for people. That's why you said humility is so important, because in order to do that, you have to let go of your ego that you know the best answer. But the benefit of that is that you burn away the things that aren't useful. And then you have something that's actually useful that you can build upon more. So I second that, and I say that, and I would say that you really do embody that in your actions and your philosophy.
Well, I'll quote Jim Rohn and say, listen to what I say, but don't watch too close. What I will say is, maybe a good way to summarize what we've been saying here is, say what you have to say, be what you are, do what it is that you do and have the humility to take feedback on everything that you say, everything that you do, and everything that you are. Have the humility to take that feedback on board and then to reinvent yourself, because really, if you think about it, that's what we as human beings are. We are the reinvention. We are the transformation constantly. And if you're not that constant transformation, then you're basically like a rock. There's no life. There's no life there. There's an ideology. There's this imagination that you are exactly this. No, be the transformation. Allow yourself to be transformed by feedback constantly. And I think that is the hope of the world, really, is in our ability to actually say, okay, I know it's going to be tough. I'm going to have to burn a lot of dead wood, but once I do that, there will be something so much better. And then 2 months from now, it's going to have to burn all over again.
Right.
But next minute, I'm going to have to burn all over again. But we do it because that's what we are.
And the quicker you do it, the more regular you do it, the less painful it is, because there's less dead wood to burn.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely. Listen, man, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure. It's great to talk philosophy with you, man, because most of our chats of late are organizational based. Yeah. So it's nice to talk philosophy with you again. So thank you so much. I'm sure everyone knows where you are, but did you want to maybe mention the Walled Garden? I know I bring it up quite a bit too, so people are pretty familiar with it, but what would you say?
Yeah, look, just head to thewalledgarden.com. Check out what we're doing there. We've got a lot of updates coming soon. There's a lot of stuff that we're trying to work on. We as an organization recognize that we've got a lot of dead wood that we've got to burn. We've got to figure out how we fit into the world and how we genuinely solve some people's problems. And in doing that, we are constantly in the cycle of how can we be better. And so please offer any feedback that you have when you go there. And something that I don't mention often enough, but I know that I should, because I really believe that one of the most important things that I've ever done was to write The Poet and the Sage. And I really hope that people will go out there and read that as well. They can get that on the Walled Garden website. So just go to thewalledgarden.store and you'll be able to find the book there. But that's a work of kind of mystical, philosophical, theological, whatever it is, poetry. It's poetry, it's prose, but it's kind of the pinnacle of my thinking. And I think people will understand me and my mission a lot more if they read The Poet and the Sage, because it'll all come through there. There's no separation between me and what it is that flows out onto the page. It's all there. It's all there for you to see. So I hope people will read that, and they can get all of my poetry on the website as well if they go to thewalledgarden.com/the sanctuary. That's my little grove on the garden. But I'll leave it there. That's all my self-promotion out of the way. Thank you, Brandon. You're a true brother in arms, and I love you, and I hope that we get to continue these conversations every month. Would be awesome.
Absolutely, man. Feelings mutual. So thanks again. Until next time.